Hello you guys, welcome back to the Peace, Love, and Happiness Club YouTube channel. My name's Nathan and today I'm here to tell you a little bit more about mounted plants. So one of my current obsessions is mounting plants on cork. I think it really brings to life and highlights how the plants that we collect in our homes really are living pieces of art. I recently made an arrangement that was a Hoya Bella, a standard Phalaenopsis like we've got here, as well as some Peperomia prostrata. Really all you'll need is a plant to mount to the cork, a piece of cork, some sphagnum moss, and then some nylon twine. A lot of the plants that we grow in our homes are actually epiphytes, so the plants that you may have potted up in soil in the wild actually grow on trees. These guys will root themselves into tree bark or rocks and absorb their nutrients through the air, the rain, the water, in a non-parasitic relationship with whatever the plant has mounted itself to. When I first saw cork, I knew it was tree bark, but that was about all I knew, so I just had to do some more research. It first started being commercially harvested in Portugal about 300 years ago. Shout out to all my people in Portugal. I've got some family over there. So the rough texture of cork allows for some good airflow across the roots and of course mimics the natural environment your plant would be growing in. What's really cool about cork is that it is naturally rot resistant. So if you were to go to the hardware store and pick up any old piece of wood and mount your plant to it, over time it would likely start to rot, but with cork that is not the case. So once your plant has outgrown the piece of cork that it's on, you could even reuse it. The cork harvesting process is highly sustainable and very fascinating. About every 9 to 10 years, a cork tree is ready to have its cork harvested, and you can remove, I believe it's up to 95% of the cork without harming the tree. If you are following along and also mounting an orchid, it is likely in some sphagnum moss, which is another great substrate to root your orchid in. So we're just gonna gently massage that root ball, slowly breaking away as much of the sphagnum as we can. I always tell people as long as you can get about 90 to 95% of the substrate away from the roots, you should be just fine. So next we'll start breaking away at this Hoya Bella here. So this is about as much substrate as I'm gonna remove from that Hoya Bella. With Hoya especially, their roots are so delicate and fine that we want to be careful not to disturb the roots too much. Now for our Peperomia prostrata, rather than breaking away the root ball and adding all of these vines into our arrangement, I'm just going to go ahead and take a couple cuttings that will then root into the moss of our arrangement over time. I always love having these trailing plants like Peperomia prostrata on hand for exactly this occasion. They're great to toss into terrariums or mounted plants. So I'm gonna grab some sphagnum moss here. I really like this little natural crevice in here. I think the orchid will sit in there nicely. So I'm gonna sort of pack the sphagnum around there, being careful not to place it down, being careful not to pack it down too hard. Remember, the goal of mounting our plants on cork is to still allow that airflow throughout the root system. Placing our orchid on top there, we'll hold it steady while we arrange our Hoya Bella strands. Another thing that's really important to keep in mind when you're mounting your plants, especially for something like an orchid, is we want to keep the substrate away from the crown of the plant. The crown of the plant is where all of the leaves connect and sort of the base of the plant right above the soil. Now, if we bury too much of that, especially on an epiphytic plant like an orchid, that crown will be pretty quick to rot and it's pretty much a death sentence for your plant. So I'd say I'm pretty happy with what that is looking like so far. All right, so I'm gently pressing down on the sphagnum, being careful not to compact it too much, but just enough that it sort of holds its shape until I have the sphagnum all secured down. So I've got a sheet of live moss here. We're gonna break away a piece that's around the right size for the root ball of our mounted plant. pretty happy with that. So at this point, we're gonna grab our nylon thread. You can also use fishing line, but in my experience, nylon thread tends to be the most transparent, so we can maintain the most natural look possible. And now we're gonna make our first couple wraps around our substrate to secure it to the cork. I always like the first couple times that I go around with the nylon to be like the main securing points to make sure that we can get those big chunks stuck, and then you can go back in and get all those little details. So once again, being mindful of the end goal here with our arrangement, we're gonna wanna keep in mind the growth pattern of something like a Peperomia prostrata. Of course, as it trails, and with this arrangement, I want it to continue to trail. I'm gonna stick these cuttings more towards the top to allow them to continue to cascade down. So I'm just gonna remove these lower two leaves here to expose the node, and then go ahead and poke a little hole in our substrate. And then we'll simply just stick it in. What I really like about using sphagnum moss on mounted plants especially is that you can sort of monitor the color of the sphagnum as a good indicator of when it's time to water. I'm gonna go ahead and drill a hole in the cork, being mindful to avoid damaging the leaves of our orchid, but I like to find sort of a central point on the cork and then just drill straight through. All right, now it's as simple as just threading that leather cord through the hole we just drilled. Coming out of the back there. All right, now we have our orchid mount with all of our other beautiful mounted specimen that we've got here in store at the moment. I hope you guys enjoyed learning a little bit more about how to mount your plant to cork. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.